All right, so I have 3 articles for you today. And the first one is more of a, that's interesting article. And this is from ABC6, which is out of Columbus. Here's how ICE arrests differ between red and blue states according to data. Which, that's not a good headline, knowing that the way ICE deals with arrests differ in red and blue states. Now, I would like to think it's because blue states actually have a spine and aren't letting ICE kidnap people, because let's face it, that's what they're doing. If you're riding in a nondescript vehicle, if you're not going to prove that you're ICE, or just going to say that you're ICE, and you're wearing a mask, you're a kidnapper. Anyway, to the article. Here's how Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrests differ between red and blue states. An analysis of ICE data reveals a stark contrast in arrest tactics between Republican-leaning and Democratic-leaning states. In Republican-leaning states, 59% of ICE arrests occurs in prisons and jails. So they're actually going after actual criminals like they said they would. Conversely, in Democratic-leaning states, ICE is more likely to arrest immigrants from the community, with 70% of arrests taking place at work sites, streets, and during mass roundups. It sounds like they want to destroy the economy of blue states and make sure that red states keep their economy in place because, well, Trump lives in a red state now. He lives in Florida, and he utilizes undocumented workers. So this is beneficial for him and for industries in red states, namely construction and fruit picking, which Trump went on a racist rant saying that Latinos are naturally predisposed to picking fruit. Which, I'm sorry, that was the justification for slavery. Because that's not racist at all. Anyway, many of those arrested in these states have no criminal records, according to CNN. Okay, I assume that's the blue states because, well, they're not going after actual criminals now, are they? Because they're not going to the jails. They're not going to prisons. They are attacking people who are doing nothing wrong, just going about their day, maybe working, or looking for work. But, we want to make sure that the Home Depots in the blue states don't have enough workers or something. The partisan gap in arrest tactics existed before President Donald Trump's second term, but has widened since last year. I wonder why that is. I mean, not the widening, but why were the tactics different already prior to Trump's second term? So that's just bizarre. Trump administration officials attribute the differences to sanctuary policies in many Democratic-controlled states and large cities, which can limit local law enforcement's cooperation with immigration officials. Again, the states that have sanctuary cities, they are not providing sanctuary to criminals. They're providing sanctuary to undocumented workers. I mean, it's not like if you were a triple murderer It's not like the blue states are going to protect you. Unlike the Trump administration, who, upon one of those um, 10 people that were sent back to the U.S. in that exchange to send the Venezuelans back, is a triple murderer. And he's walking the streets of the U.S. as we speak, because all Trump cares about is getting rid of bad people. Yeah, that works. ICE may be increasing its arrests and detentions as the recent budget reconciliation bill signed by President Trump includes billions in new funding for the agency. Maybe they can afford badges so they don't have to, so they're able to actually prove they are who they say they are. Or maybe decals on their cars so people know that they're ICE agents. Oh, that is the end of this article. Fascinating. Okay, ABC6. That was not much of an article. All right. So let's move to the next article, and this is deeply infuriating. I mean, I just don't have words. This is from CBS News. Tennessee executes man with implanted heart device despite concerns over shock risk. So he has a device in him. Actually, it's a defibrillator. He has a device in him to keep his heart going, yet they are trying to kill him. Now, either these people are seriously incompetent, because there should be no reason that they do not know about this fact. So either that, or they use the Constitution as toilet paper, because we have a specific amendment against cruel and unusual punishment. It's not that hard. All right. An inmate executed by Tennessee without deactivating his implanted defibrillator said he was hurting badly shortly after the lethal injection began, according to several witnesses. Well, of course. His defibrillator and the lethal injection are working at odds. Byron Black was put to death despite uncertainty about whether the device would shock his heart when the lethal chemicals took effect. His attorney said they will review data kept by the device as part of an autopsy. Black died at 10:43 a.m., prison officials said. It was about 10 minutes after the execution started, and Black talked about being in pain. Black looked around the room as the execution started and could be heard sighing and breathing heavily. All 7 media witnesses to the execution agreed he appeared to be in discomfort. Black was executed after a back and forth in court over whether officials would need to turn off his implantable cardioverter defibrillator, or ICD. Black, 69, was in a wheelchair, suffering from dementia, brain damage, kidney failure, congestive heart failure, and other conditions, his attorneys have said. Well, Jesus Christ, why go through lethal injection then? Apparently, he was well on his way to death anyway. It's not like he was going to be living a productive life. Why are we wasting money, which it costs more to put someone to death than life in prison, when literally he has a million things that could have killed him for free? The nonprofit Death Penalty Information Center said it's unaware of any other cases in which an inmate was making similar claims to blacks about ICDs or pacemakers. Black's attorneys said they haven't found a comparable case either. Ew. Black was convicted in the 1988 shooting deaths of his girlfriend, Angela Clay, 29, and her two daughters, Latoya Clay, 9, and Lakeisha Clay, 6. Prosecutors said he was in a jealous rage when he shot the three at their home. Right. What did the girls have to do with this jealousy exactly? At the time, Black was on work release while serving time for shooting Clay's estranged husband. So he was a stellar individual. Clay's sister said Black will now have to take up what he did with a higher power. His family is now going through the same thing we went through 37 years ago. I can't say I'm sorry because we never got an apology, Lynette Bell, Angela Clay's sister, said in a statement read by a victim's advocate after the execution. Black's lawyer said the execution was shameful. Today, the state of Tennessee killed a gentle, kind, fragile, intellectually disabled man in a violation of the laws of our country simply because they could, Attorney Kelly Henry said. Now, are you claiming that he didn't do the thing that he was accused of? Because what about that says he's gentle? I mean, I guess we all have it within us to snap and go on a killing rampage, but he killed his daughters. It's one thing to kill the estranged husband, to kill his girlfriend, but to kill his kids? What did they do? So, having said all that, we have laws against cruel and unusual punishment. Whether you agree with that law or not, it's in the Constitution. We have that. So, maybe don't do that? All right. In mid-July, a trial court judge agreed with Black's attorneys that officials must have the defibrillator deactivated to avert the risk that it could cause unnecessary pain and prolong the execution. But the state Supreme Court intervened Thursday to overturn that decision, saying the other judge lacked authority to order the change. The state disputed that the lethal injection would cause Black's defibrillator to shock him and said he wouldn't feel them regardless. Apparently you were wrong. Henry said Black's defense team will carefully review autopsy results, EKG data from Black, and information from the defibrillator to determine what exactly happened during the execution. She said she was especially concerned about his head movement and complaints of pain because a massive dose of pentobarbital used to kill inmates is supposed to rapidly leave them unconscious. The fact that he was able to raise his head several times and express pain tells you that the pentobarbital was not acting the way the state's experts claim it acts, Henry said. Prison officials did not comment on witnesses and Black's attorney saying he appeared conscious or his complaints of pain. Of course not. It was Tennessee's second execution since May, after a pause for 5 years, first because of COVID-19 and then because of missteps by state corrections officials. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, Tennessee has 46 inmates on death row. The state has granted clemency 3 times. 28 men have died by court-ordered execution so far this year in the U.S., and 9 other people are scheduled to be put to death in 7 states during the remainder of 2025. The number of executions this year exceeded the 25 carried out last year and in 2018. It is the highest total since 2015, when 28 people were put to death. Black had an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, which is a small battery-powered electronic device that is surgically implanted in the chest. It served as a pacemaker and an emergency defibrillator. Black's attorneys have stated that to ensure it's off, a doctor must place a programming device over the implant site, sending it a deactivation command, with no surgery required. The legal case also spurred a reminder that most medical professionals consider participation in executions a violation of healthcare ethics. Exactly. In recent years, Black's legal team have unsuccessfully tried to get a new hearing over whether he is intellectually disabled and ineligible for the death penalty under U.S. Supreme Court precedent. His attorneys have said that if they had delayed a prior attempt to seek his intellectual disability claim, he would have been spared under a 2021 state law. Last month, Black's lawyers sent a letter to Tennessee governor urging him to grant Black clemency and asking him to commute his sentence to life in prison. Mr. Black, who lives with an intellectual disability, has now been on death row for 25 years, the letter read. From infancy, he suffered from the effects of prenatal alcohol exposure, resulting in fetal alcohol syndrome. As a toddler, he was exposed to toxic lead, compounding his lifelong cognitive and developmental impairments. Nashville District Attorney Glenn Funk contended in 2022 that Black is intellectually disabled and deserved a hearing under that 2021 law, but the judge denied it. That is because the 2021 law denies a hearing to people on death row who have already filed a similar request, and a court has ruled on it on the merits. In Funk's attempt, he focused on input from an expert for the state in 2004 who determined back then that Black didn't meet the criteria for what was then called mental retardation. But she concluded that Black met the new law's criteria for a diagnosis of intellectual disability. Black also sought a determination by the courts that he was incompetent to be executed. Okay, so that is the end of that article. All right. So, one last article. And this one is from The Advocate. Brown University is functionally inaccessible to transgender students after Trump's settlement. And this is just going to basically go over the consequences of people who are thinking that they are protecting cis people, whether it be in athletics or just in bathrooms in general. This is showing just how messed up. At least I think this article is going to get into detail as to just how wrong that is. Okay. Brown University's leafy Rhode Island campus once felt like a safe haven, but that isn't the case anymore for some trans students after the Ivy League institution signed a binding agreement with the Trump administration that redefines who belongs in gendered spaces. The agreement signed July 30th restores more than $50 million in frozen federal research funding, but requires Brown to adopt the federal government's binary definition of male and female across all single-sex campus facilities. Clause 11C of the resolution, which was not spelled out in the university's public messaging, explicitly applies the definition to dorms, restrooms, locker rooms, and other intimate spaces, not just athletics. Now, first off, the binary definition of male and female completely ignores intersex. That's one thing. Number two, if you happen to be trans, say you are a trans woman. Let's start with that. So you were born male. So you would be in a dorm with other males. What are the chances that your roommate, because unless you have the money to have a single dorm room, and even then, bathrooms are usually communal, unless, like I said, you're in a situation where you can have a private bathroom. But when I was in graduate school, even though we had a suite, it was still, even though I had a single room, I shared that space with 3 other people. Plus, actually, 3 other people. Plus, you're on a floor. You have a common area. So it's not like you would be completely alone. The bathroom is communal in the sense that it's part of a suite, so I'm sharing it with 3 other people. The bathroom, the shower, that is not a safe space for someone who identifies as a woman. That's not safe at all. And it's not any better if you're a trans man, because first off, men in general, there are cis men who are stronger than other cis men. So, again, they can get overpowered and attacked. So, not a safe space for them. But anyway, moving back to the article. The agreement signed... Okay, I read that already. I had to screenshot the actual language of the agreement and send it to multiple people and point out this clause 11C. One transgender student in their 30s told the advocate on the condition of anonymity to avoid retaliation. Everyone I talked to thought it only applied to sports, but it applies to everything. They said that even students on campus who consider themselves informed were unaware of the policy's scope. Pretty much everyone I talked to went by what the university said rather than read the full agreement. In a July 30th campus-wide email shared with the advocate, Brown President Christina H. Paxson, told students and faculty that the agreements would allow the university to move forward after a period of considerable uncertainty, while protecting its academic mission and core values. Paxson emphasized that the deal preserved Brown's control over curriculum and academic speech, restored suspended research funding, and involved no admission of wrongdoing. But her message offered no specifics about the agreement's treatment of trans students across campus, which applies the federal definition of sex to all single-sex facilities, not just housing and athletics, which were mentioned. Instead, Paxson urged recipients to read the full 9-page agreement themselves. The agreement also includes a clause that empowers the federal government to take further action to enforce compliance. That clause, the students said, introduced a chilling new level of risk. Functionally transgender people, anytime they now want to use a single-sex facility on campus, there's now this risk involved, not just for themselves, but the university as a whole. And I'm pretty sure that the Trump administration is going to further make them capitulate, because they've already proven that if you capitulate, that doesn't mean you're safe. They can further make you do stuff. So, yeah. Though they've been medically transitioning for more than a decade, have updated documentation, and typically don't get asked about their gender identity, the students said none of that offers protection under the new framework. Even I, as a stealth person, do not feel comfortable using single-sex facilities on campus, they said. It would open up my peers and me to potential repercussions. So, by stealth, I assume that this person means that they pass. So here's a person who passes, who's still afraid of using single-sex facilities, because no matter whichever one they use, they might get into trouble. If they use the one that fits their gender identity, as long as nobody outs them, they're fine. But if they're outed and forced to use the other facilities, they could get attacked for being in the wrong facility because they don't look like they belong in the facility of the sex of that they were born as. So yeah, I can see that this is going to be a tough one. They emphasize that the campus community remains affirming, but the policy shift feels destabilizing. I definitely feel unsafe, they said. Not because of the university's community, but I feel unsafe in the sense that there's that implication that my university can invade the privacy of not just myself, but any transgender person. And that's the other thing. They could just be doing this to say, "Oh yeah, we'll totally do that," and then completely ignore it. But what if they encounter someone who does have a problem with trans people, and suddenly they have to enforce this agreement? So yeah, this puts trans people in a very tough spot. The funding freeze that led to the agreement began in April when the Trump administration halted reimbursements and suspended new federal research awards to Brown as part of a series of civil rights investigations. The Department of Education launched 3 compliance reviews focused on allegations of anti-Semitism and racial bias in admissions, along with scrutiny of Brown's adherence to Title IX. The new definition of sex was mandated by Executive Order 14186, signed by President Donald Trump on January 20th, 2025. That order directs all federal agencies to interpret sex as immutable and biological, explicitly excluding gender identity, and revokes recognition of LGBTQ inclusive Title IX protections issued under the previous administration. In an emailed statement to The Advocate, Brown Vice President for News and Strategic Campus Communications, Brian Clark, said the agreement does not address Brown's ability to continue to implement gender-inclusive measures on campus. Clark noted that Brown will continue offering gender-inclusive housing and restrooms and allow students to specify pronouns and chosen names in university systems. Brown remains fully committed to serving the needs of all students and community members in a manner consistent with our long-established policy of non-discrimination, he added. Now, like I said, maybe that'll work, because let's face it, other countries have been hosing Trump left and right with his trade agreements. So maybe this will work. But it'll only take one dick at the university to bring everything tumbling down. But the student who spoke with the advocate said the university's public communications minimized the implications of the agreement. The university put out this statement, which made it seem like everything was fine and under control, but left a lot of gaps, they said. There has been no clear guidance on how this will be enforced, just silence, and that silence is terrifying. They said they are now working with the department to finish their program off campus and limit time spent at the university. If I have to be on campus, I'll only use single-stall, gender-inclusive restrooms, they said, but there's usually only one per building, which is a crying shame. I mean, it's all well and good that they have gender-inclusive bathrooms, but there should be more, because there could be trans students who don't feel comfortable using single-sex facilities. There could be cis people who don't feel comfortable using single-sex facilities. I think I've mentioned this before on this channel. I used to work with a woman who suffered from, I guess it's called pee shyness. If somebody was in the bathroom with her, and she did tell me this once, that she just cannot pee. And so she even said that what she normally does is she'll turn on the faucet, and somehow that helps. I guess because nobody can hear her pee. So she was complaining about how she couldn't pee because I was in the bathroom with her. So I pulled up my pants, marched out of the bathroom, turned on the faucet. She said, "Thank you." And we did our business and went on our way. But that is a thing that happens. There are people who don't feel comfortable using single-sex bathrooms for a variety of reasons. They might not, feel comfortable because of pee shyness, or maybe they just need to change their clothes and they don't feel comfortable about someone walking in on them, even though it's someone of the same sex. They might not feel comfortable. So there should be more facilities like this. I mean, family facilities are good too, but they also should have these type of facilities for people who just don't feel comfortable having someone walk in on them. And let's face it, anyone who's been in a stall knows that you can barely turn around in those things unless they're the handicapped stalls. So you're not going to be able to change your clothes in them. Or it's going to be really, really hard. So, yeah, they should have all of the above. They shouldn't just have one per building. Though Brown's agreement follows similar federal settlements, including a $221 million deal signed by Columbia University, this one appears to go further. Columbia's restrictions were limited to athletic participation. Brown's applies to all single-sex spaces. I wonder why this is more rigid than what Columbia's was. The agreement also bars Brown from providing gender-affirming care to minors. It's a university. What minors are there? Prohibits the use of race or proxy factors in admissions. Okay, whatever. Mandates a climate survey focused on Jewish students. And requires renewed participation with Israeli institutions. Okay. Now, what the hell a climate survey focused on Jewish students is, I have no clue. Obviously, people are whining about racial quotas. It's like, no, that's not what is happening. Um, if you have to choose between two equally qualified people, and you have a shit ton of white people, and you don't have a lot of black people, and one person is white, one person is black, you're probably going to go with the black person. That's not reverse discrimination. That's just pointing out that black people have been historically disadvantaged. Now, if this black person is rich, comes from a rich family, then I would think that you wouldn't have to take race into account anymore because this person isn't disadvantaged. But there's more. It's not just that they look at a black person off the street who's dumb as a rock and it's like, hey, come on in. Not how this works. Same thing with women. They don't just pick a woman off the street. They have to qualify. Requires renewed partnership with Israeli institutions. That is just ridiculous. They should be able to partner with whichever institutions they want. And it's not anti-Semitic to say, fuck off, we are not going to partner with you while there's a genocide going on in Gaza. Now, you could say that it's not these institutions' fault, it's the government, which that is true. Most of the time it's the government. There are Jewish settlers who are asshats as well, but, so you can give a good reason why you shouldn't completely divest from Israeli institutions, but that would be up to the school, not the federal government, to decide that. In a joint statement, GLAD Law and the American Civil Liberties Union of Rhode Island and the Rhode Island Center for Justice called the agreement profoundly disturbing. We are especially alarmed by the university's seeming willingness to use transgender people as a bargaining chip by adopting the narrow definition of sex from the administration's discriminatory executive order that denies transgender people's existence, the groups wrote. It is shocking that an institution that has long welcomed, celebrated, and protected LGBTQ plus people on campus would so quickly cave into the administration's cruel and coercive agenda. Now, like I said, I do not agree with capitulation, but I am hoping that they'll be like, okay, we made this agreement, now we're going to totally ignore this part. But again, all it takes is one dick to make that completely fall apart. They encouraged students affected by the policy to reach out for legal help. We hope other universities and educational institutions will stand strong against this administration's bullying and coercion to protect the core values of the pursuit and protections of knowledge and understanding, academic freedom, freedom of expression, and openness. The Human Rights Campaign also condemned the agreement. No one should feel ostracized for navigating their life as their most authentic self, especially when the barriers involve something as basic as using a restroom or having a safe place to sleep. HRC Senior Press Secretary Jared Keller told The Advocate. With the federal government's mandates on single-sex spaces on college campuses, we're witnessing another attempt by this administration to control the lives of people who are simply trying to pursue their education. Keller said the policy fits a broader political pattern. The backlash facing the trans community is not new, he said, but is especially disheartening in today's politically charged and socially tense climate shaped by policies that claim to protect people while attacking others. The students said the public must not ignore the scope of what is happening. This isn't even the beginning of the national attack on trans rights. We are somewhere in the middle, they said. More people need to draw attention and to actively resist against agreements like this. Speak out, organize in whichever ways you can, and make sure that hopefully for the rest of this administration, we can stay somewhere in the middle and not fall fully off this cliff that we're going down. They added that the initial sense of betrayal could have been mitigated with honesty. Of course, there's this feeling of shock and betrayal at having read the actual agreement, they said, but they wouldn't be as heightened if the university had communicated this at the outset. I have to admit that, I would like to think that Brown is going to ignore the trans thing. And they even said that, oh yeah, we're going to totally ignore that part. But at the same time, then why didn't you just, email the whole communication and say, yeah, this affects trans people in all single-sex spaces, not just athletics. That would have made people think, okay, they're just going to ignore this part. That they're going to say, all right, we made this agreement, but don't worry, we're not going to actually enforce it. But they didn't do that. They hid it. So that says they're ashamed of what they did, but that they might feel guilty about what they did, but that implies that they're going to actually enforce that. So, not great. All right, the U.S. Department of Education did not respond to the advocates' request for comment. Wait, the U.S. Department of Education still exists? I thought Trump got rid of that. I know he wants to. Anyway, that is the end of that last article. I don't believe I have anything more to add. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.